Okay, so while he's trying to pull up the PowerPoint presentation that I had for you guys today, I really want to thank you guys for having me. I want to thank Rafal for inviting me here to speak, and thank you all guys for coming out of your crazy schedules, I'm assuming. So, just in brief, I went to Egypt as a Benjamin Gilman Scholar this past January. I was there in December. So, just in short, the program started, I think, before Christmas, actually. But some people stayed because they wanted to spend Christmas with their family, which is totally acceptable. And so we got there and we did our research. A lot of my research was really linked with, religion and religion and politics within Egypt and how that plays out. I'm sure many of you have, okay, thank you, this is great. I'm sure many of you have heard about, the bombings of the church in Alexandria, the conflict, or how they would like to say the conflict between the Christians and the Muslims there. And so, in short, my classmates had left January 24th. And so, because I wasn't able to really see my family because I was so, I was so focused on my research, and if you see one family, you don't see the rest, then everyone gets upset. So I just decided not to see anyone until I get my research done. And so, once my classmates said bye, and I went to the airport to them January 25th, and said, okay, I don't start class until the 30th. I can miss at least 2 days, so say I'll be back, by the beginning of February. So I ended up extending my stay. That morning on January 25th, which is known as the National Police Day in Egypt, it also so happens to be my sister's birthday, so I called her that morning, wished her a happy birthday. She had mentioned, hey, the media is all over this protest that's going on today. Are you going? And she said, wait, I'm not going to ask. When are you going? Are you going by yourself? And so I told her, my aunt didn't really want me to go. She said that, it's going to be dangerous, I'd rather you go with someone, so I started, calling my friends. I went to school in Egypt, an elementary school, and so I started calling my friends and emailing and Facebook. I was like, all right, listen, I have to find it. So then she said, well, okay, I'm not going to feel comfortable unless you go with guys. And I was like, oh man, okay. So then I started calling, and so I happened to get in contact with two of my friends, and they're like, you sure you want to go? Most girls really don't want to go to this. I'm like, are you serious? This is a demonstration in Egypt. I go all the ones here in New York, prevalent to my interest and the causes that I stand for. I'm not going to miss this. So we ended up going. So I remember being there, and I wasn't too far from Tahrir Square. Just to give you a brief, I can walk from Tahrir Square where I live. It's very close. I live in Zamalek. And Tahrir Square was really kind of like the hangout. It's kind of like the 42nd, you consider the 42nd Street of New York. It's really where people will sit, will hang out. A lot of college students are there. And so I would usually meet my friends from the University of Cairo there, and we would hang out. It was pretty much the spot where you really don't think much there, but it represented a lot. At least now you see the signification of it in its Liberation Square. And so I remember going to the protest, and I was so dumbfounded. There were so many individuals. I have been to a lot of demonstrations here in New York, but nothing like seeing there. There were so many people. There were children, families. And at that point, my friend looks at me and he goes, this is not going to last. This is going to last for more than 1 day. And another friend was like, no, come on. People, they're going to protest. They're going to, shed some tears, and then everyone's going to go home and forget about everything. This is Egypt after all. The government pretty much owns every step that we take. And one friend was like, no, this is going to be serious. I've never seen anything like this before. And so they placed the emphasis on a peaceful, nature of the struggle, of this revolution, and how they wanted this to be a non-violent. If they were going to get what they wanted the world to see that we want change, but we're going to do it peacefully. Granted, there were violent, clashes between citizens, but for the most part, it was one of the most peaceful protests or demonstrations I've ever seen, or pretty much I've ever heard in history. And so I'm just going to share with you a couple of pictures. Just to give you a background, the main reason why this protest had first come about January 25th on National Police Day was because Egypt is known for their police brutality. And it really goes back to the emergency law that was pretty much there since 1967. I'm not going to go too much into history, but basically this police law extends constitutional rights, suspends all types of rights for freedom of speech. They can pretty much imprison anyone they wanted for any possible reason. Police brutality is something big, and actually one of the reasons why this protest took place was because a blogger from Alexandria, Egypt, he ended up somehow in a cafe getting footage of police smuggling drugs in a cafe. And so word got around that this guy is going to put this video up on the blog, and it's going to ruin the reputation. I will tell you this much, that as much as the Egyptians love the attention, they have a lot of pride. We Egyptians have a lot of pride, and pride in the sense that we do not want anyone, especially the international community, to see us at a vulnerable state. And this revolution pretty much put us in that position. So I know that if you have followed this revolution on CNN, you'll see that a lot of people would say, why would you want to photograph this, or why do you want to film this? This is embarrassing. You only come at our worst state, and you never see us at our best. And it's hard to be our best when we feel like we are chained under Mubarak's regime. And so one of the posters here that you will see, it pretty much translates, "The blood of the innocent will not be lost." And just to go back about this guy, once the police found out that he had this video, they went into the cafe, the same cafe where all this happened, and they dragged him out, and they beat him to death. There were 18 witnesses that actually stood there and watched. Can you imagine being put in that position and knowing that if you somehow try to help or interject, there goes your life? And so they just kind of watched. There was not much that they can do. And so they beat him to death. And then protests started to happen in Alexandria. And so that's what kind of ignited the 25th. This is supposed to be National Police Day. Well, we're going to protest against the police because they haven't done anything but abuse their citizens. And so a part of these posters, and he's just one of the many, and the government ended up doing a trial. And what happened was that they dismissed it and said that he died. I'm sure that they paid forensics to say that he swallowed a pack of drugs, and this is how he died. Meanwhile, his pictures, actually, believe it or not, the pictures of his body were released on Facebook and are still there. And a person who swallowed drugs and died of that nature, so then how do you explain his corpse then? How do you explain the bruises, the cuts? And so it was pretty much ignited by that. Before that, there was a man who lit himself on fire in front of the Egyptian parliament, protesting food inflation and protesting low wages for employment and unemployment in Egypt. And just to give you a sense, every age range that you can imagine. After the 25th, they started saying, okay, we need millions of people to come down to Tahrir Square. And so people began to camp out there, and families, and I will show you pictures, and this is just one kid. He was just so stern when I asked him to take a picture, and he goes, "Where is this going?" And I told him, it's like, wow, okay. I told him, listen, yeah, I'm a student from the U.S. He goes, "Are you going to try to make me look bad? Because I'm not bad, I just want freedom." And I was just like, no, I'm not going to try to make you look bad. I'm Egyptian too. He goes, "Are you?" And I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah, how many passports do you have?" And I was just like, wow, well, and this is before he let me take the picture. So he just, like, the whole time he's, like, standing there and, like, scoring me. He wants to know all these answers. I was like, well, I have the American passport, but I also have the Egyptian. And he was like, oh, he goes, "So what do you identify with more?" He was like, "I'd like to believe that I identify with both. I value the morals. I value the values of," I don't know, you don't want to use two words in a sentence, but I hold close the American values, but at the same time, I cherish my Egyptian citizenship. And he just looked at me, he goes, "All right, you can take a picture of me." Again, you can take a picture of me, good answer. But the whole time, like, I'm laughing this off, but the whole time this kid had the most stern face on the entire time. This man, he was running around frantically with the newspaper. And in this issue, they were announcing, like, deaths of, like, police brutality and all these other cases. And within this newspaper, they also had the charges of, Muhammad Saeed, which is basically the man who died in Alexandria. They had his case in there. And once it was announced that the government is going to dismiss the case and pretty much say that he died because he swallowed a pack of drugs, and forensics will prove it. And one of the reasons that we protested the Egyptian government is corruption. You can get by with anything. And I know that we feel sometimes that the American government can also be corrupt on certain levels, but I promise you that I'm sure that if you watch closely to the international world, we do have it pretty good compared to most countries, and Egypt being one of them. This man, he got hurt, and he had something wrapped on his head, and the poster pretty much, he's pretty much cursing out Mubarak in this poster, but he was standing there, and he also had something on his arm. He probably hurt himself during the demonstrations. this is one man who was reading, people are camping out, and then you'll start to see these are, as the day goes by, their families, and you'll see pictures where you'll have women and men, and there was a great balance of all people. And it wasn't something, one of the things I did an interview with Geraldo at Large on Fox News, and he referred to me as a kid. And I don't know how or why, but he said, do you fear the Muslim Brotherhood while you were there? And I was like, no, actually, you hardly knew they were there. And if they were there, then they were there as any other Egyptian citizen. And he was like, you don't think that they're going to take power, you don't fear? Well, you must not fear because you're Muslim. And I'm like, if I do care, then I care because, these are my Egyptian, brothers and sisters. It has nothing to do with religion. And I told him, matter of fact, this revolution was about these individuals. It was a people's revolution. It had nothing to do with religion. There were no religious slogans at all at this protest. And I was there from I was there once the protest happened on the 25th. I wasn't there the 26th because we weren't sure what was going on. 27th, I started camping out. Even though it was against my family's will, at this point I had no connection with my parents, so I didn't feel as guilty because they were not there to tell me no. But my aunt was like, if your mother finds out, and I was like, I'm sure Mom already knows I'm here. Like, it wouldn't be a surprise. And so I remember taking the bike, and I was like, listen, I'm going to take this bike, I'll bring it back whenever, just because I didn't want to walk. God forbid someone came out. At this point, all citizens are they were the protectors of the street. After the demonstration on the 25th on Police Day, there were no police officers. Now, can you imagine New York City with no police officers? Please try to imagine that, because I simply can't. But in Egypt, there were no police officers because it was dangerous for them at this point. They feared us, so they were not in uniform. So if they were there, they were just citizens, kind of minding their own business. They're like, listen, I'm not getting involved anymore because this is serious, and the government isn't going to protect us anymore. People don't like us, clearly. And again, that doesn't mean all of them. Corruption you'll find on both sides. And so this man, he had a newspaper over his head, and he was camping. I believe this guy was 19. And then here you have the military. And just to explain, for the most part, Egyptians trust the military. The relationship between them is that the military, if they had to choose between the military and the police, they choose the police. And it's because they feel like the military kind of has this empathy with them, and they understand their struggles, whereas the police, it's more of they view police corruption. This is how they would say it, and whenever you ask them, this is the word that they would give you in Arabic. And then here you have men, leaning, again, these blankets. I mean, people were camping out all night, and at this time, it would get really cold at night. Egypt in the morning was fine. This is considered their winter. Their winter is 65 degrees. That's winter for them. But at night, it would probably get to about 40 or 30 degrees. But people were, standing outside. These are people sleeping. I believe this was right after the sun had, after the sunrise, and people were still sleeping against the tanks, with Egyptian flags stood there, and it was great because I've never, ever witnessed such solidarity in my life, because everyone was there for the same reason. There was no such thing as I. It was we, and it was so inspiring to be amongst people who just really wanted collectively to change. And at this point, they had enough. And now you'll see this with the Middle East. I mean, 2011, it is the year for the Middle East. Because now they're starting to kind of look at each other and say, well, if Tunis can do it, then I can do it. And if Egypt can do it, Bahrain can do it, and Libya can do it, and all these other countries can do it. And so you have even Morocco, which is a monarchy, they love their king, but they don't like their prime minister, and so they're going to protest. Because now they're like, listen, if we don't like something, we're going to protest, because apparently it's working. And so here you have kids on top of a tank, and you have an army official sitting up there, and, the type of relationships that they allowed. All they're there is to basically guard the safety for them, but they're not kind of telling them, you can't do that, and you can't do that, and you can't do that. Because at this point, they realize that there are too many people. And we've reached too far into the struggle to tell them they can't. Because at the end of the day, when I take off this uniform, I am just as Egyptian as they are. And this is what actually one of the military officials had told me.